Anyway, it says, "Let no man judge you in meat or drink, or respect of a feast day or holy day, or a new moon, or the Sabbath days, which are all shadows, or all a shadow of things to come. But the body is of Christ." Now, I like the King James translation, but here it's a little bit unclear. The NIV. Anton, do we have NIV on this computer? Okay, we don't have NIV. NIV says, "The reality is found in Christ." These are all shadows of things to come, but the reality is found in Christ. Well, how is it that Christ, or let me just say it this way. When Jesus came into the world, He came to bring reality to humanity and to us and to believers. He came to bring reality which was previously only foreshadowed. Sort of like those animal sacrifices. When they offered the blood of those animals whose blood could never take away sins, they foreshadowed a sacrifice of Jesus, which would come and literally and really, in reality, take away sins. Jesus came to bring about a transition from things that were foreshadowings and which were, by the way, carnal. They were all physical. All of those things, those sacrifices were physical. All of those observances and all of those requirements of the law, the food laws and the days of the week, all those things were physical. And they were outward things that were done to foreshadow realities, as it says here. Let me read that again, make sure I got that right. Verse 17, "which are a shadow of things to come." They're foreshadowings of realities that are to be found in Christ. So Jesus came, and when He came to bring reality, which was spiritual, He came into a world which had been for hundreds of years practicing things that were physical and foreshadowing spiritual reality. So it created a kind of a tension, a kind of a stress, because Jesus was bringing a transition to something new. And let's look at some examples of that. There's one I like in John's Gospel, chapter 4. And I want to begin reading with verse 5. I think if you read the Gospels with this thought in mind, you can detect that tension sometimes. Because people naturally think literally and physically, and Jesus was coming to bring something that was spiritual, but the actual reality of what was being foreshadowed. John chapter 4, beginning with verse 5. Then cometh he to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near to the parcel of ground that Jacob gave his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well. And it was about the 6th hour, or noon, I guess is what that would be. So he's there, it's about noontime. There cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me to drink." For his disciples were gone away into the city to buy meat. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, "How is it that thou, being a Jew, ask drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans." Now, this goes back to a division that took place way back in Jewish history. After the reign of Solomon, when Solomon's son came along, the nation of Israel was split into two parts. It was made up of 12 tribes. And 2 of the tribes hung together. That was Judah and Benjamin. And they took the southern part of what was formerly an undivided state. They took the southern part, which was smaller, and there were only 2 tribes, but they had the city of Jerusalem. And the northern part, the 10 tribes stayed in the north, and they called themselves Israel. So now we had a division, Judah in the south with Jerusalem. And Judah, by the way, is where the Jews are derived from, the name Judah. And the north is called Israel with the 10 tribes in the north. Well, the problem is now that there's this division in almost like a civil war, this state of animosity between the 10 tribes in the north and the 2 in the south, which have Jerusalem. The guys in the north, calling themselves Israel, they don't have Jerusalem, they don't have the temple anymore. Well, so they decided, we'll just make our own temple, and we'll put it here, and Samaria is our capital, and we'll put it right here. Well, that created further animosity with the 2 tribes in the south, and so this is the beginnings of this hatred and this division between the Samaritans and the Jews. And the Jews considered the Samaritans not quite fully Jews. They were sort of half. They were accused of sort of marrying into the native people, the Canaanites, and but be that as it may, the actual root of the problem goes back to that separation, the fact that Judah and Benjamin had Jerusalem and the temple. Jesus answered and said unto her, verse 10, "If you knew the gift of God, and who it was that says to you, give me to drink, you would have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water, or literally the water of life. It's the same phrase that's translated in the book of Revelation, the water of life. I would give you, if you knew who I was, in other words, you would ask me and I would give you the water of life. Now, she's thinking about physical water in a well. And Jesus said, if you knew who I was, you'd ask me and I'd give you something to drink. He didn't mean a glass of water. He meant something spiritual, didn't he? But it was the reality. It was real, what he was talking about. The woman said to him, Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence hast thou this living water, or water of life? Are you greater than our father Jacob, which gave us this well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle? In other words, what are you talking about? Are you greater than Jacob, great patriarch? He gave us this well, and you say you've got better water than Jacob here? She sort of doesn't know what he's talking about. Verse 13, Jesus answered and said to her, Whosoever drinks of this water shall thirst again. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water, springing up into everlasting life. You can see that Jesus is turning her attention away from physical water in a physical well to something spiritual that he likens to water, that he likens to a well. He says, I can give you something that will be in you, a well of water springing up into everlasting life. I'll put something on the inside of you. Still, she's not quite, grasping this. But you see, Jesus is turning her attention towards something that's spiritual. Bringing her to a spiritual reality is what he's endeavoring to do. The woman said to him, Sir, give me this water, that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. I think what she's thinking is, all right, I'll play along. I'll go along with you. Go ahead and give me this water then. Let's see what this is all about. Verse 16. Jesus said to her, Go, call thy husband, and come hither. The woman answered and said, I have no husband. Jesus said, Thou hast well said, I have no husband. For thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband. In that saidst thou truly. Now, did Jesus say this? Do you think he said this to embarrass her? No, I don't think so. Do you think he said this to make her feel bad? I don't think so. I think Jesus said this to try to relieve her of something she was already feeling bad about. I think Jesus never comes to make things worse. I think he brought this up to try to alleviate, to try to free her from past guilt of what's happened in the past. We don't know her whole story here. We don't know what's happened. She might not have been at fault. But I think Jesus is here not trying to make her feel bad, but try to lift her out of a situation. When things happen, it's natural that we blame ourselves. There's just no way around that. We just naturally do that. Jesus comes not to make it worse, but to lift it up off of us, to take our burden away. That's why he said this to this woman here. Anyway, verse 19. The woman said to him, Sir, I perceive that you're a prophet. That's a pretty good answer. When he comes along and tells you everything about your life, and again, Jesus is not out to expose us and to embarrass us, or he wants to help us. That's his only goal, is to help us, to make things right. He comes to bless us with blessings in his hand. And then she says, Sir, I perceive you're a prophet. In other words, pretty plain. Now, how could you have known all these things otherwise? Now, like so many people do, she changes the subject. This is getting a little too personal, a little too close to home. Now she brings up this great theological issue in verse 20. Total change of subject here. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain. You say that in Jerusalem is the place men ought to worship. Going back to this division that took place hundreds of years ago. And so let's don't talk about me and my 5 husbands. Let's talk about this big theological issue. I don't know if you've ever had this experience when you're talking to someone, and I have. I've literally had this experience more than once. Talking to someone about their problems or something, and then finally I'll bring up, you need Jesus in your life. That's what you need. All these problems, these are just symptoms on the surface, but what you really need is Jesus, and he'll help you with all these things. I've said that to people, on the phone, conversing with people. And then the next thing they say is, well, what about people in Africa that have never heard the gospel? Well, don't worry about people in Africa. The issue is you right now. God will take care of the people in Africa. He knows what he's doing. You don't need to lose sleep over that. He'll take care of people here and there and everywhere. He's got people he sends to those places, But that's the way that's a little bit like what she's doing here.